Skip, the word intergenerational has become one of those fun church buzzwords that seems to be making the rounds these days. How might the idea of intergenerational ministry intersect with mission trips, retreats, pilgrimages? Can those two go together? And if so, could you speak to how that might
Yeah,
look?
of course they can. In fact, I think by default, they actually probably happen more often than maybe just youth group trips, because an awful lot of churches are 42 adults and 4 kids, and the kids go with the adults on the mission trip.
Yeah.
But to address the importance and the challenge, to address the importance of intergenerational activity, I want to lift up one of the more recent writings of Andy Root, a fantastic practical theologian and friend at Luther Seminary. Andy went deep and long into the question of what were the dynamics of Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus. And as an exemplar, a template, it was that Ananias came alongside him and cared for and nurtured him while he was at his depths.
Yeah.
And the takeaway for Andy was, if we really want true, deep transformation in adolescence, it's going to happen because an adult accompanies them through the death experience that they encounter at the high school, when they don't make the team, when their girlfriend drops them, when they're not allowed to sit at the cool table. Pick any one of the many disasters of adolescence.
Yeah.
And so real transformation can't happen with a youth minister and 30 people, 30 kids, because the youth minister doesn't have the bandwidth to walk through 30 of these very difficult experiences.
Yeah.
He advocated radically that the job of the youth worker is to cultivate adult mentors so that they will come alongside the youth and be available to them as unconditionally caring, non-parental adults that will walk through the you bottom of a near-death experience. Well, that's one of the reasons intergenerational ministry is so important, because the sheer power of creating the possibility of mentoring relationships between adults in the church and young people in the church, so that the young people are integrated into the life of the church and have the advantage of the love and care of more than just their parents. Sure. It also creates the prospect of why a young person would feel comfortable coming to church on Sunday morning. He actually knows adults who he's going to see there who care about him.
Yeah.
So that's why it's certainly possible and often advantageous to think about, let's do an intergenerational mission trip, let's do an intergenerational retreat, etc. I would say you need to be mindful of 2 things. The first is, if we want that liminal space, if we want to create the possibility of that transcendent communion that the Turners were locating, it was contingent on anti-structure, according to the Turners, a reversal of the power dynamics, rank, role, status, etc. of home. The kids may be open to that with one another, and the kids may be open to that with adults. Are your adults open to it when they are on the mission trip, or are they the bosses and the power center?
Yeah.
And it isn't because your adults aren't loving, and it isn't because they're not committed to the kids. Adults have just spent decades, perhaps, in their roles, and hold them a little more tightly than the kids do. And so I certainly want to be an advocate for intergenerational activity in retreats and mission trips, etc. But if we're going to lean into the kind of experience that we've been talking about in transformation, then there's going to have to be some spiritual movement by the adults to be ready to participate as peers on the retreat or the mission trip, rather than the de facto bosses and power centers. And the last thing I want to say is, of course, go after multi-generational ministry, mentoring programs, etc. But there is something about adolescence. Patricia Hirsch wrote a great book, A Tribe Apart. There is a power of groups of adolescents gathering as peers and moving into vulnerable spaces that they would be less likely to move into if adults were present. And that doesn't mean don't do intergenerational work, but I recoil a little against some of the exponents of intergenerational ministry who think that it's somehow inappropriate for the young people to be in a peer-only activity.
Sure.
You know, you can take Kenda Dean, who's maybe our greatest practical theologian of adolescent ministry, and she has a caution to the church about the one-eared Mickey Mouse hat, that the kids are off by themselves, and that's a great caution to the church. But I don't think Kenda means by that, and therefore they should never be off by themselves.
Right.
And so I think it's a both and is the answer to your question.
Yeah.